Welcome to Let's Cool One, everybody. This is Jack Macklin, your host. We got a special guest on today. We got Jacob Martin. What's up, Jacob?
Hey Jack, how you doing? Good to be here.
Yeah, man. Good to have you, bro. Jacob and we became friends in Nashville, so I'm just stoked to catch up with him a little bit today and talk some music. So tell me what's good, Jacob. Tell me something.
Yeah, man. Well, it's good to be talking to you today, man. I've ever since you went back up to Chicago, man, we've been missing you here.
Yeah, dude, how's the
Uh,
scene going? How's it like?
Man, it's good. You remember what it was like, man. It's kind of you have your contingent of standbys and the old faithful kind of people who go to all the jams and all the hangs, and then you've got this endless rotating cast of people who just showed up a month ago. And seeing as Nashville's not the biggest city for jazz, they all kind of end up filtering to like the same like three or four sessions that everybody goes to,
Right.
So, like whatever, if it's the Villager or whether it's Leland's Jam, it's like always the situation. Um, I don't go for 4 or 5 months and then show up. I went last week and there was like six new cats I'd never met before.
Oh, really?
Who were killing, yeah, like
Yeah.
ranging from like 20 to mid 50s, and so it's good, man. And other than that, I mean, the scene in general is kind of just
Fire, right?
taking along as
Yeah.
usual.
Dude, yeah. So there's new. How often? Like, there seems to be new people in Nashville still all the time, right? Just
Yeah.
moving down there and like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, yeah, it honestly kind of surprises me sometimes. I mean, I've been kind of out of the day-to-day hang. I've got some regular gigs and I've got like regular friends that, we get together and play quite a bit, but it's been keeping me busy, so I haven't been going to kind of the jams like I used to. But like I said, I go once every couple months, and yeah, like there's always like half a dozen new guys, and you
right.
know.
No, I'm pretty sure we either met at Living Waters or
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
Villager, but like that like more when you were going every week type of deal when we were hanging out mostly
Yeah,
playing there.
that's exactly right. I mean, that's like right, that must have been right after COVID. So like that
Yeah.
was right when like the work was not plentiful. And
Yeah, that
so,
was that was a great time, man. Like right
mhm.
that first year of that Villager Jam was like so many people would come out and so many people would hang. That was it was always fun. Like Joel Fromm was in Nashville. I mean, so it was like he was there. Some other people came out. Like John Coward came out to the Villager a couple times. Like it was a good hang, man. It's a good
Yeah, man.
spot.
Yeah, we had Joel, and we actually Dan Hitchcock got out there a few times, and
Yeah, Dan.
it was one of those things where like it was all these guys, like kind of young and old, who were all really hungry and killing, and it's still like that to a certain extent. But the kind of funny thing is that, like I kind of alluded to it, right after COVID, the work was not plentiful. I mean, like a whole lot of people who are really killing moved down at once, and they were all looking for work for like 6 months. So, like, what do you do when you look for work? You go out and try to find a session, and you kind of go every night. You kind of don't care. But the funny thing is, now a lot of those guys who used to show up all the time are now all like on the road, or they've got their regular gigs. So then like your Monday night at 11 p.m. becomes kind of sacred to you. You could like quit like just going out to drink beer and play tunes for 3 hours, which it's
Yeah.
kind of a shame, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to be the change, and like I've been going a lot more now with with the last few during the last couple weeks. Yeah, I've gotten some homies together and we've just basically gone down to try to get back, get our asses kicked a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, it's once you get into a nice routine, you got your gigs, you got your all that stuff. Um, it's easier to not want to go out at 11 p.m. on a Monday. You're right. But yeah, I was just kind of talking about, man, I've been going out to the sessions here in Chicago, and like something that I I guess I missed or didn't really realize was so much different is that, well, a lot of these places, there's a spot that in here they have a session every Wednesday. It's called the Hungry Brain.
Mm.
It's like more of like an avant-garde club, I'd have to say. Like that's
Right.
something that's huge up here too, is that there's a lot of like really artistic music, a lot of really like avant-garde stuff, and people aren't really afraid to play that. There's an audience place for it. You know, people really love that. And this dude Ted Sirota hosts this session every Wednesday. He went to Berkeley, came up with like Roy Hargrove, Kurt Rosenwinkel, like, you know, was roommates with them, was on Mark Turner's senior recital, I'm pretty sure. So it's like,
Wow.
that's pretty cool. And but he's a drummer, hosts this session every Wednesday. And you know, I just something that would happen. It would probably happen in Nashville, but it would be taken as like a serious vibe. But what happened the other day is like this young kid. It's like kind of a younger session, like college students, some younger professionals, but a lot of college students were there. And this, I don't know this guy's name. Even if I did, I wouldn't say it. But he was up there playing guitar, and it was late in the session. But the like, it was not really at like a bar where, I mean, it is a bar where everyone's chilling and kind of mingling, but it's like there's a stage and up front, and like everyone's kind of listening to the music, you know, and everyone's kind of all the tables are faced towards the stage. Everyone's sitting down, kind of being quiet. It's like a cocktail lounge type of thing, where it's like not really like a rowdy bar like Villager where there's a session, or, you know, like Living Waters is cool, but it's still like a brewery vibe, you know, where it's like, this is like, no, this is a jazz club and people are listening to the music here. But I was going to say that this one dude, it was like a tenor battle type of thing. There was 3 tenors up there. They played like a quick rhythm changes, but this guitar player, just like every single time the second A would come around, he'd go to the bridge, you know, and he was just like screwing up the form.
Yeah.
And eventually, like after the first saxophone player played and he kept on screwing up, wouldn't stop, he stopped playing. Then the next saxophone player played, and in the middle of the second saxophone player's solo, he like hit him on the shoulder and he's like, "Lay out, let the pianist comp," you know. And then everyone was kind of like, "Oh yeah, you know, it is what it is," you know,
because he was the last, he was the last day or whatever.
Yeah, and you know, skipping the last day, you know, I'm not saying that that's you know, the nicest thing to do, but it's like people want to play the music right, you know, and I really respect that, you know. And definitely at some other sessions in different places, like, you know, it's definitely a little bit more lenient to, you know.
Well, you know, this is just us gonna be having the vibing conversation for the 1,000th time.
Yeah. No.
that we've had a million times. But I mean, it's fruitful. I don't know, man. I feel you, because I think it's a supply and demand problem sometimes, you know, because realistically, like, you know, if you move to a big city that has a tradition, you know, whether it be Chicago or New York, or the prime examples, but I'm sure London's like that, because London's had a jazz scene going back to the 50s. And I'm sure Los Angeles in certain areas is like that, even though they have a totally different kind of, like, you know, there's a different focus out there anyway. But, you know, I think when you move to a city like that, and you claim to sort of pursue some sort of excellence, you know, at your art, then it's kind of to be expected to at least, you know, if you're, you know, screwing up, I got rhythm changes, like, then it does you no good for people to be nice to you about it. You know what I mean? Like, you really, like, at that point, like, you know, you're not necessarily a student. You may be I mean, we're lifelong students, obviously, but you may not be like a beginner or even intermediate, right? You may have something under your belt. You may have, you know, you claim a certain knowledge, and whether it's nerves or whether it's lack of preparation or whatever, like, you know, if you keep screwing up something as basic as like the form on like the most stock sort of tune of all, like the things you should know, you know, like in the middle of the night when I wake you up, you know, like you should be able to play. I got rhythm changes, you know what I mean? And so it's like, at that point, like, is it really like that big of a vibe if someone's like, "Hey man, like, you know, lay out." Like,
Yeah.
maybe you'll learn. Maybe
Stroll.
you'll learn. Yeah, stroll. And I mean, honestly, man, like, I've learned the most on the bandstand and at jams when I was like screwing up and somebody
Right.
told me right then and there. And maybe like you get your feelings hurt, or you get a little defensive, or you want to, you know, I mean, you don't know, you want to fight the guy or something, depending on how he says it. But, you know, you kind of calm down a little bit. You look at it from a different perspective and you're like, man, like, actually, no, you're right. And like, I'm never going to forget this. Like, I bet that like, that may be one of the last time that guy like ever does that.
Oh yeah,
Like,
I mean, it was like one of those
like,
things too, where everyone's watching you. So it's like
yeah.
there's the whole club is like up there watching you. And this guy, he was like so upset at himself, he's like shaking his head, at
Hmm.
himself, and it's just like,
Right, because
and
he knows
he
something's wrong.
knows,
Yeah.
and like that, like I respect that a lot because it's like, he obviously got up there and kind of embarrassed himself a little bit. And, obviously that's no one wants to embarrass themselves, but he did realize that something was off, knows that
Hmm.
he probably has to ask what was going on if he didn't know already.
Hmm.
And I respect that a lot rather than just like, someone kind of going up there and not really caring if they
Yeah.
screw up, or kind of like, oh shoot, I don't really care, like, jazz, this is just my jazz day or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's like a little different from like these people, because that they actually love it and they really care about it. And
Yeah.
that's something that I really enjoy about being back up here, is that there's just so many people that are really, really passionate about jazz in particular, and I guess like more of the creative Black American music side. And
Hmm.
I mentioned a little bit earlier is that something really cool up here that you got a little bit in Nashville, but definitely stronger up here is like the avant-garde scene. Like I
Yeah.
was at the Chicago Jazz Festival, a while ago, but also just all the clubs down here that really cater towards that type of music. A lot of it is definitely people are really stretching themselves creatively. I saw the Orrin Evans group, and it's just
Hmm.
like one of the best pianists in jazz today. And his band was just obviously some stuff was a little was swinging and stuff, but most of it was pretty avant-garde. I don't really know what other word to use besides
Yeah.
avant-garde, but it was just like free, I guess, or just really, trying to speak to the gods. I don't know,
Yeah.
like,
Really
but
taking some chances. Yeah.
yeah, really just kind of going for it and playing music. And so I really like that. It's really creatively stimulating to go into that. Obviously, I'm not like don't have a lot of experience playing avant-garde or things like that, but definitely the scene here really caters towards that type of music, which is like, wow, that's pretty deep.
Yeah, I mean, Chicago's got a great history of that anyway, right? I mean, you got
Yeah,
Roscoe Mitchell and the
the
Art Ensemble of
art
Chicago, and
ensemble,
all these,
right?
yeah. And I mean, I mean, that's just this morning the only thing that comes to my head off the top of my head, but I mean, it's countless, right? I mean, kind
Yeah,
of going to the well, or going to the edge of like what's musically expected or acceptable, right? Like taking, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because aesthetically, that's not everybody's cup of tea. And like we're at a place with this music where there's such a tradition of playing very well developed vocabulary that comes from a specific place, right? I mean, whether it's, I mean, it all goes back to, um, the same source, the Bob guys, and then like Lester Young, and, there's different strains, but then the flip side of that, of course, is like that spontaneity. So when you like strip out all the expectations and just turn it into just like taking full creative liberty, yeah, I mean the results may vary, right, as far as like the pleasant, how pleasant it is to listen to, but the thing about it is like what you pointed out, like I mean seeing it live is really that's really the thing.
Yeah, there is not really that much compares to seeing it live. You know, I think I'll speak on one more part of that, but like the Chicago Jazz Fest, that was like so cool. It was so sick. There was a lot of jazz fests, and that's something that I definitely missed, is like the jazz fest or things like that, because
Hmm.
there's just so many amazing musicians all compiled together in one place. You know, but the Chicago Jazz Fest in particular, it was so cool because I probably mentioned this on here. That's cool one before, but after that fest, my buddy Kyle Swan, I don't know if I talked about him before, but he's an amazing drummer, and he was playing with Bobby Watson at the
Mm.
jazz showcase. And it
Wow.
was like Sunday after the Jazz Fest, and I went to it was like a jam session at the Jazz Showcase. I went to the
Mm.
Jazz Showcase there, and Eddie Henderson is hanging out there. Mike Clark's hanging out there. Gerald Cannon's hanging out there. Bob Hurst is hanging out there. Orrin Evans is there. Uh, Donald Harrison is there. you know? So it's like, man, like all these cats are just
He has
chilling.
royalty, man, royalty.
Yeah, yeah, royalty. And
What
I'm like,
for people like us, man, that's it.
yeah, and I'm kind of just like stoked just to even like be in these guys' presence because
Mhm.
it's like damn, like these are some masters right here just kind of hanging out at the jazz showcase. And it's like,
Yeah.
you know, I love playing all the time, and that's what I want to do is playing all the time. But sometimes it just like it feels really cool to like even just like be a part of this tiny little lineage, being around these guys who've been such you know giants in the field
Mm.
of jazz, and just even just being around them and hearing them play or just whatever, you know, being in the same city as they are right now just has like a deeper feeling, you know, in it. And that's really cool. And you know, so I love that. And something that, you know, I speak on too is like I love playing gigs in Nashville. Like the difference is from Chicago to Nashville right now is that I was just playing a lot more in Nashville. And
Right.
like, you know, I love the art of playing music and like being able to make a living through it. But that'll happen here. It's just like a bigger ladder to climb, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I thought that that was really sick, and I feel like that's something you can only get in kind of like a bigger city like Chicago, is like having all those masters hang out in one place.
Oh yeah, it's the living tradition. I mean, that's there's nothing like it. And yeah, it's geographic. I mean, it's one of the few things left in this world that is purely geographic. Like, you know what I mean? Like you can see even gigs at this point, man. Like, yeah, it's not the same. I'll be the first to say that it's not the same. Like watching a live stream um from another city is not the same, even if the production is very good.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, you know, you and I have spent countless hours, you know, watching whether it be, you know, Emmett Cohen or whether it be just like
Yeah.
going on YouTube and finding all these like new and old gigs. And sure, like that's one thing that, you know, our like parents or, you know, grandparents could never do, you know, but the fact of the matter is like you can't go hang like with these guys anywhere. You
Right.
have to be at the place. And like I think in a world where everything's kind of become the same across great distances. I mean, that's one of the things that kind of keeps us like keeps it on a human scale, if that makes sense. Like you have to be there, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and the same goes with I mean, it really is the same thing that applies to a hang like with your peers, obviously, you know, but the difference is that, you know, your peers aren't on like the records that you listen to for the
Yeah.
most part. You know what I mean?
For
Like, you
sure.
know,
For,
anyway.
no,
Yeah.
no, for sure. I mean, and there are masters that come through all types of cities all the time,
Mhm.
you know. But I
Yeah,
don't
but
know.
here you're catching them at home.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like you're catching
It's
them at home.
when
Yeah.
you see just like a legend like Bob Hurst, for example, kind of just
Mhm.
like go up and jam at a jam session, you know, and just like what he plays on a rhythm changes when he just gets called up randomly, and just be like, okay, I'm gonna like actually listen to this master play. And you hear all these crazy substitutions that he's doing, how he's interacting with the drummer, how he's taking
Mhm.
all these more risks rather than he would on a recording or a gig. You know, he's like
Right.
he's really just kind of going in there and like
Mhm.
kind of putting on a clinic about how to play rhythm changes or just play the bass or play in like a modern type of way, you know?
Right,
And
right.
it's like seeing that live is like second to none, really. And yeah, just kind of like the energy in the room too, and how everyone reacts to that, because something like when a master plays, it's just so powerful that everyone just kind of gets sucked in, you know? And
Mhm.
yeah, so yeah, so that's like been a crazy highlight about being here, is just like the amount of talented masters that are just like playing, you know, it's just crazy.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
amazing, man. Well, I'm happy for you. I'm glad you're enjoying it up there, man.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it, you know. Like I said, I've been doing a bunch of different stuff up here so far. I got this weekly Thursday gig, which is like the start of playing all the time. But yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, I know you're from, where are you from, Jacob?
So, yeah, okay, so I was born and lived till I was 11 years old in the Czech Republic. So, I was born in Prague and then lived about 20 to 30 minutes outside of Prague, which is the capital city. And so yeah, I'm like I've split heritage. My dad's from the United States and my mom's from the Czech Republic. And so moved to Nashville when I was 11, and honestly, it's been where I've stayed ever since. You know, I've kind of been here and there for short stints, but I always make my way back here, and I've never really up and left since then. And I always attribute that to the fact that like I moved across the Atlantic Ocean like 3 or 4 times before the age of 6. So I think that I kind of got the
Yeah.
most people get stuck in their hometown, and then by the time they're 18, they want to leave.
Yeah.
By the time I was 18, I was just still in my first decade of figuring out how to live in the United States, if that makes
Right.
sense. You
Right.
know what I mean? Which in a lot of ways is no different. But I think that as you get older, I mean, at least as I get older, I've learned that there are a lot of things that like as a kid or a young man, I kind of perceived, but then let go because you're young and you move along. You've got your friends, you've got your, what your career or your interests, whatever it is that you're trying to build. And then as I get older now, I'm like, okay, like I can now trace how, sorry, my cat's freaking out right now. I can now like trace, I can trace some of those feelings that I kind of had as a kid and why, like the whole like the feeling of instability and change as a young man. And I think that I like kind of ended up, that's why I ended up staying here. And surprisingly enough, or funnily enough, when by the time I got the bug to move from here, right, I was thinking about either doing a master's, going to the East Coast, or just like taking a chance at a place like Chicago, or, you know what I mean? Just kind of like
Right.
trying to switch it up. That's around the time I met my now wife, but we were talking about like, hey, like, where could we move, blah, blah, blah. And then COVID hit. And so that squashed those plans. And then literally after COVID, I went out and started meeting all these people who were from all these different cities, such as yourself, such
Right.
as Alex, such as Leland Nelson, such as, I mean, some of these people that are like good friends of mine now who I've seen, who are like staples of the Nashville scene, who were new 3 or 4 years ago. And I had this moment of realization at one of these hangs. Like, I think you were there. It must have been the Villager. And I was like, damn, if I had moved somewhere, I would have just met these people there, but they're all coming here,
Yeah.
And
Right.
I know where everything's at, and I have my family here. You know what I mean? It kind of was one of those things, like
Yeah.
how Nashville kind of, I feel a deep connection here. So it's definitely kind of
Yeah,
like
for sure, man. I mean, I love it.
hometown.
I miss it a lot too. Nashville is a beautiful spot. I'm definitely glad that it's not so far away, and I have tons of homies there that I can
Yeah.
have excuses to come visit. So with that being from the Czech Republic, like, how does one get into like jazz saxophone?
So surprisingly enough, I mean, or maybe not, it might not be surprising to any listeners who are familiar at all with that part of the world, but
Yeah.
the Czech Republic has a very robust music scene and jazz scene, and it's so deep in the culture to the point that there is a few like sort of sayings, like folk sayings about like Czech people relating to music. I'm not gonna there's one, so Czech to muzikant. It's like every Czech person is a musician. It's kind of hard to translate that language a little bit
Why do they say
to
that?
retain the
Why do
meaning.
they say every Czech guy is a musician?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, man. It's just something I kind of heard growing up, and like the thing about it is like, going back many generations, every little village and every town has like a municipal band. That's where I first started playing like with other people. And actually, I wanted to play saxophone, but the municipal band was like too full of saxophones and reed players, so they put me on trumpet. That
Wow.
was when I was like 9 or 10, and so I hated it because I hadn't heard of Miles Davis at that point, and I was very confused why I couldn't play the instrument I wanted to play. Because the thing is, so yeah, I mean, we can get into this later, some of my early influences, but let's just say that my
No, go
earliest
ahead.
influences of music. Well, let's just say that my earliest influences of music was my dad had Coltrane, the Coltrane records, and then the Cannonball Adderley's greatest hits,
Ooh.
which had I need to find this, but it was like a compilation of like I think his Atlantic years, and it had some live cuts. The first track that I've been addicted to ever since I was like 8 years old was this live cut of the Work song from the live in Europe, where they're playing in Belgium, which is just like one of the absolutely most genius blues alto solos of all time. Like that is pure fire. And then the other one was the Cannonball and Coltrane record. So like, of course, I
Live
didn't
in
know anything about.
Chicago?
Yeah, live in Chicago. That's the
Yeah.
one, or in Chicago rather. But
Yeah, right. The Limehouse Blues and
yeah, Limehouse Blues and
Central Park.
yeah,
No, Grand Central.
Grand Central, yeah, and what else is on there? Wabash, that great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
man,
another
that's
street in Chicago.
no, well, okay, then that makes sense.
Wabash.
Wabash, baby,
Yeah.
but no, so those were kind of my early musical influences, and of course, I had no idea what kind of wizardry Cannonball was up to. You know, when he's like blowing for 11 minutes, I didn't know what a form was. I didn't know what a blues was. All I knew that I loved it, and so when it came time, I kind of started. So I started my relationship with music goes back to like right after I was born because was born with some pretty serious fine motor skill issues as a kid, and so like part of my physical therapy was playing the recorder. So I started playing the recorder
Oh wow.
like right around like probably 1 years old, which is kind of funny. I
Dang.
ended
So
up playing I
you've
ended
been
up
doing
playing
it
the
forever.
recorder. Yeah, dude. I ended up playing the recorder for like way too long. Um, as far as like I mean, ironically, if I kept up with it, I probably would be in some kind of baroque like reenactment shit right now. But anyway, so
So you could
once it
shred that
became
shit.
yeah, well, not anymore, but I used to. But back then, like when it became time for me to actually pick up a real instrument or like a more a more versatile instrument, I wanted to pick saxophone, and I didn't get a chance to actually play saxophone until I was like 14 years old and living in the United States. That's when I started, so like for real, because before that it was trumpet, and then I got put on clarinet.
So
Um,
when you finally got to the United States, you can be like, I could finally play the instrument I want to play.
Well, that's what I thought, but then I joined. Then in fifth grade, I went to audition for the stuff, and the same thing happened for middle school band, and the same thing happened. They already had too many saxophones, so they threw me on clarinet. So for the first 2 years of middle school, I played clarinet. So I was like
Oh
foiled
wow.
again, and it wasn't till yeah, it wasn't until I was like 14 or 15 that I got the chance, like probably late middle school, early high school.
The
That
clarinet and saxophone are like surprisingly kind of similar though, right?
absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a good starting point. I mean, they're different in key ways that a lot of like woodwind doublers like to, especially saxophone players are like we're like the laziest of the woodwinds, like we're definitely like there's a lot of things that are kind of exact opposites from like a mechanical perspective, but the idea is generally the same.
Yeah, you still play your like, concert B flat major scale the same way pretty much.
Yeah, more or less. It's definitely there's a little bit of a difference in the registers, how it splits up. Like
Yeah, yeah.
clarinet's a
Or
beautiful
tenor.
instrument, and yeah, clarinet's a beautiful instrument, and I've been playing it a little bit more
I've been
recent.
shedding some clarinet too.
Oh, for your new
Yeah.
gig.
Yeah, no, yeah, because I have to like teach clarinet to like
Yeah.
middle schoolers. So I'm like, figuring it out. It's kind of interesting too, because it's like I'm never really. So I'm like trying to like play some tunes on the clarinet or whatever, and it's like, man, it's kind of fun. Not gonna
hmm
lie.
Yeah, no, it's a yeah. I mean, it's a bitch, but it's a fun instrument. It's
Yeah,
gorgeous. So you got to bring your clarinet down when you come back to town. We play some duets, dude.
yeah, right, right.
Who's
So,
better? Because
so
I'm pretty trash.
probably, yeah, yeah, probably around. So you're saying middle school you played the saxophone, and so did you have like a strong I know, I mean, obviously Nashville's Music City where you're from, but did you have like a strong jazz band in your high school that really inspired you to pursue it? Or what was like besides like the records that you were loving, what was like your biggest inspiration to pursue being a musician or jazz saxophone?
Man, my biggest inspiration honestly was playing because I got bit with the live playing like playing out very early. And before I had any business being on stage. Like before I was any good, dude. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
funny because I always like joke about that like this career, this life path kind of like pursued me despite my best efforts. Because like up until the last few years, I was not a very disciplined person, and I kind of like had a pretty like questionable relationship with practice and with consistency. But the one thing that just I'm addicted to is performing and playing with other people. And it doesn't have to be in front of people. It's not about being on stage necessarily, but it's about the stakes of the moment and like learning the music and having to like, you know, negotiate that situation in a creative, or you know what I mean, what have you kind of manner with other people. So I think that's really what it was. Now that I think about it, I think it was really mostly just the like I got a chance to play. I mean, you know, Kimbro's, right?
Yeah, of
Out in
course.
Franklin. So that was I was taking guitar lessons at the same time as I was playing saxophone, like for the first few years. And
We had
my
a couple
teacher,
fun nights out at Kimbro's.
yeah, man, yeah, several, my, man, um, hopefully more to come, man. But
Yeah, yeah,
anyway,
right.
the whole thing was, you know, my guitar teacher, great dude. I'm not going to name him obviously because I'm about to say something that's not very kind, but he's a great player, man. But I think that he kind of missed his calling to be a internationally famous rock star. So he kind of took the, you know, his students' recitals as a chance to kind of shine himself. So
Oh,
he
really?
would book these, yeah, yeah. So he would book these recitals at Kimbro's. And if I say that, anybody who knows him will immediately be able to tell who I'm talking about. The but what I realized, so it was funny. We did that, and there was some like bar band playing after that recital, and I had my horn with me, and someone's like, "Hey, that kid's got saxophone." Because like as soon as my guitar player found out that I play saxophone, he just for those recitals, I never played guitar again. I just like played horn parts, backing up the other students.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, so then this other band was like, "Hey, let's get this kid up here." Like I said, no business being up there, but I think that was one of the first times I realized that like not knowing what's going on and having to use your ears to figure out how to play, um, really like that's the thing I love, man. Like
Hmm.
I think that's really beyond the records because it took me a good number of years. I mean, honestly, until college. Like, I mean, I took saxophone lessons here and there. Like, I mean, I had a teacher who influenced me in when I was in high school. But like I said, I was a terrible student, and the best thing that he ever provide, and he also was kind of one of these guys who wasn't he didn't have a methodology. Like, it was if you didn't dig it, if you weren't one of these like diligent practicers, then he would just do the same thing with you every week. And I think at one point he just gave up on that and started just showing me records because he knew that that's what really got me going. So
Yeah.
this guy showed me some of my favorite records of all time, um, or some of my favorite saxophone players, not necessarily records, but you know, he got me into Brecker and he got me into Sanborn, which was kind of like my first bridge into like the modern approach.
Yeah.
And you know, even like this Tony DeGrati and like these guys like sort of like in the Brecker vein, Rick Margitza, like he got me into some of these guys. And it wasn't until college that I realized that there was like an actual path to pursue between like myself and my heroes. You know, it was always just this kind of like shooting in the dark. Like I didn't know that people knew what they were doing. If you know what I
Yeah.
mean, I was like, oh, either you got it or you don't. Like you just got to sort of shoot in the dark until you figure out, you know, till you got to stab in the dark till you can play something as genius as, you know,
Yeah.
as Cannonball or Brecker. And then of course now I realize the folly of that. It's hilarious to think about. But
Right. No, I mean, I would have to say that that's interesting to hear because I've like always kind of I got into music, you know, by my high school and like the how I decided to pursue music was everyone around me was always like, man, you need to practice, practice, practice. And it was just like I didn't really have a lot of the professional experience right away. And I didn't really have the I had this gig in high school. It was at this Szechuan. It was at this Chinese restaurant, and I got paid $25 an orange chicken. And
hell
I
yeah,
was
dude.
like, you know, and I had like local friends that were there. I mean, but it was in the suburbs of Chicago, probably 50
Mm,
miles west of the city. So it wasn't like there was jazz greats out there. It's like a pretty
yeah,
suburban little town, you know, and
right. You could be anywhere, right? Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it's the Midwest.
it could
Yeah.
be anywhere, you know, and so we would just play. We would like kind of take our shot at standards and probably like really butcher them in this just little Chinese spot in high school. And like sometimes it was probably pretty decent, but like, um, so, but I was always taught that, you know, you have to practice, practice, practice to get really good. And this is how you're going to get the scholarships there. And
Mm,
like when you're talking about the ear thing and listening to records, I like, you know, I always started to get good technically at my instrument. And that's how I started, was just like, man, I didn't really understand the records yet. And like this one interview, I guess, that I'm thinking about now is what really got kind of started getting me into checking out a ton of records, was this Pat Metheny interview where he was just like, yeah, when I was, well, it was two things that he said. He was like, when I think everybody who kind of does this jazz thing for a living has to have a really deep period where they're just checking out all the records, you know?
Right.
And it's just like, he was talking about that. He was like, yeah, this 4 or 5 long period, or however long it is, to where you're just like really immersed in these like Miles Davis, into like the first great quartet, like Red Garland, all these Bud Powell, all the masters, Thelonious Monk, where you're really just checking these guys out and listening to the records. And then he said something else, which I guess didn't really resonate with me until more recently too, is that he said that for a jazz guitar player, the only thing that you need to know is Wes Montgomery's Smoking at the Half Note. And that will show you how to play jazz guitar today. And that's and like, obviously I have different opinions on Pat Metheny. Still, I'm one of the best to ever do it at guitar, obviously. But I do really like him as a sideman in the 90s, probably the best still. I think that was probably his best era. But anyway, I was going into where I like it was really always academic for me, was with music.
Yeah.
You know, it was always like my school had a really great music program. Like all the people older than me were like going into school for music. So I was like, man, I want to follow these guys' path too, because it's cool. So like the only way you can get a good scholarship is if you practice your ass off, you know, and then you go into these schools. And then it wasn't until later, until I like actually probably 2020, when I don't know if I talked to you about this, but I was doing this porch show.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was really successful. It was with my buddy, Danny Bauer, but we played in Old Town Chicago, and we were playing on the front porch for about every day from 5 to 7 for like 7 months long. And we would have Matt Ulery came and played, and we had other amazing players like, I can't name them all right now, all Chicago staples. Yeah. But that was when I really started to realize that the ear is so important, because like I've always been transcribing and things like that, but it wasn't until then to where I'm constantly playing with somebody better than me that I could like hear that, oh, you know, you need to be hearing what the bass is doing like that moment. You know, you can't like go back and like hear it later. It's like if he's playing this substitution or doing that or doing this, it's like we gotta be understanding what's going on that moment, knowing how to react. And that stuff only, you know, the technical stuff only gets you so far until you can actually understand how to make music with other people, which is the most addicting part for me now, is just like how to interact with somebody and how to have a good time. Because like you can just be up there and just play your instrument, but like playing music with somebody else is like a whole different thing. And I think that is the most addicting and coolest part about being a performer.
That's funny, man. It seems like we took the opposite paths and ended up in the same place, honestly.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's pretty funny, you know. It's like I feel like it's just kind of like a product of where I'm from too, you know.
Totally. I mean, yeah, that's you got me thinking about that, because I remember when I was that age, like really getting into music for real as a teenager, I was the only person at my school, aside from probably my best friend, who was a drummer and brilliant pianist, who doesn't really play. He doesn't play out, but he's just one of these guys. Um, but anyway, we were like the only two people who were really checking out records and who were actually trying to improvise. And so everybody else around me, like in the jazz band, like, you know, it's so funny. Like I was definitely like significantly technically worse than like all these than my two friends who were first and second chair alto players, who were like doing all state in classical music. You know what I mean? Like wind ensemble soloists and all this stuff. Those people had no idea how to improvise, had no ears outside of, outside of their lane, right? And they're phenomenal, classical saxophone players. One of them is currently a really successful band director in Georgia, I think, and the other one, I don't know what they're doing. He's probably some sort of physicist or finance guy, because that's how his brain worked. But the whole thing was just like, you know, everybody was like, oh my God, Jake, like, you know, you take a solo. And I'm sure it was trash, but you know, it was definitely like one of those things where the desire and the willingness to like kind of take the chance and embarrass yourself really took me far. But then, yeah, I did have that sort of reckoning at some point where I was like, man, I moved to Murfreesboro to go to school, and I originally went for recording industry, and then I met Don Alico, and I met David Williford, and I met Javon, and I met all these people. And I was like, yo, okay, there's a there's a thing here. Like
Yeah.
there's a way. And I was like, man, recording audio recording. I'm like, I'm gonna spend 4 years. And I had already gotten pretty good at Ableton Live, and I already had some pretty like I had some recording experience from high school under my pocket, because that's the other thing I did musically with one of my best friends at the time. We would record, we'd throw our twin reverb into the bathroom and crank it up all the way, and then record drums and work on miking techniques. And so like I had a little bit of that in my belt, and I was like, man, like I can learn that on my own, but like I can't study with these people, and I can't like get to know these people, and I can't um develop a relationship and get my ass kicked by these people on my horn without like getting into the program. So that's where I did not go into school desiring to be a jazz studies major or study music in school. Beyond that, but then I kind of like met those guys, and I was in a band that looked like it was going to do really well. So I was like, well, we were it kind of made sense. Like I kind of had this moment where I followed my heart a little bit more than my brain at the time, because I was pretty skeptical of doing music as a career. But I realized there's a point to it, and then there's a reason that I've been chasing this my whole life. So I
Yeah.
might as well just give it a shot, So anyway, that's
Yeah, dude. I mean, that's pretty sweet. Like, I would have to say that like my experience also sounds a little different, because when I was like, in high school, it was like I don't think I was a particularly amazing student either. The only thing I was really good at was music, and the only thing I
mm,
really cared about was music. And I wasn't going to go to college. I didn't want to go to college, and the
yeah.
only way that I was going to go to college was through music.
Hmm.
So I'm like, let me audition here and here. And so I did,
Yeah.
then I ended up going to DePaul, which was a great school. But yeah, it was just like, it was kind of like, it was like the only thing I was good at. So I was like, I wanted to do, I'm sure I was good at other things, but for the most part, it was like, that's the only thing that I wanted to pursue, was this path in music. So, so yeah, that I'm still working on the other side though, the recording side too. There's all these things that I want to do with like I did release some music earlier this year, which was cool. So a
Hmm.
couple two singles,
Yeah.
Um you released anything lately? You have a
Man, I
band?
haven't man, I haven't actually released anything. So this is the thing. I'm still in the I was telling you a little bit before we started recording about my like work situation. So it's been hitting the gigs super hard, but actually
Yeah, let's get into that. What yeah, take me through, like, what are your gigs like? How's it like playing music today?
okay, so I will say that Nashville's been good to me, man, especially in the last few years. My sort of anchor of my week is the infamous Skulls Rainbow Room review burlesque show. So that's an old Nashville staple. That used to
Burlesque
be a
show.
really yeah, it used to be a very sketchy strip club since like they opened in the 40s and closed down in the
They've
90s,
been open
reopened
since the
in
40s?
yeah, dude. So
Really?
yep, uh-huh, yep. And it's funny because like my dad and his friends that grew up here, when I told them about because they opened in the 40s, and then the guy that opened it, who ran it every single day, was murdered in the 90s in that building.
Oh,
So
wow.
some of his former employees tried to rob him, and then they killed him in the process because he's this old man who was just like refusing to give up the bag, So he tried to fight him, and then there was two of them, and they basically beat him to death. But he so
That's kind of
anyway,
screwed
so
up.
oh, dude, really screwed up. Over like I don't know, like over like $50 or something. Like I don't
Oh,
know, or
wow.
$100. Yeah, like they because they thought he had all this money on him, and turns out it wasn't even that much. But they got busted a few years later. But anyway, the whole point is just that. So that was that's the story of that place. It's kind of a Nashville institution, but it was reopened in the 2010s by the new ownership and turned into kind of like the tourist version of this old like seedy kind of Nashville strip joint. So it's nice, man. It's a great spot. Like, if anybody listening to this, if anybody listening to this ends up in Nashville at any point, come through Thursday through Sunday night,
There you
starting
go.
at 11 p.m. It's a great spot. I will say this, like,
So that's
I'm
your
happy to
steady.
work there. That's my steadiest. Yeah, that's been every week for 3 years, and
That's
we
Thursday nights, right? Or twice a week.
so Thursday, Saturday, and then we just added Sundays. So I'm there three times a week.
There you go. From 11 to 1.
11, yeah, 11 to 1, 11 to 12:30, something depending on the crowd. So we do the actual show is from about 11 to 12:15, 12:20, and then we usually do half an hour to 45 minutes of requests on the back end, or we
Yeah, I
if people
checked out that show once. That's pretty killing. There's dancers, right? And going
yeah,
on and
it's burlesque, so it's this strip tease. It's like a sort of reenactment of the sort of interwar Germany cabaret clubs, with
yeah.
all the tassels and the feathers and the sparkles. And then we got my buddy, the band leader, is just popping off at the mouth with this with all these jokes, and he's roasting the
There you go.
audience, and it's kind of it's
So
rowdy and fun. But anyway, so that's kind of the anchor
so for those that
of
don't
my
know, are
week.
you guys swinging in there or like what's the music like?
Dude, a mix, honestly. It's a mix, dude. Like, so it depends on the night. So typically we have themes every night. So typically Thursdays we've been doing, this past summer we've been doing, and into the fall we've been doing like 60s, like summer of love type stuff. And I think we're going to switch it up pretty soon, but that was like the theme for Thursdays. Fridays they do 80s night 100% of the time. That's just I don't play Fridays. They got a synth guy instead of me, obviously. And then Saturdays like classic burlesque, and Sundays classic as well. So what that means is that that community, or um, that sort of subset of dance, has like they have their own book basically, right? They've got their own set of standards. So it's stuff like Harlem Nocturne, stuff like Night Train. We play Harlem Nocturne and Night Train almost every Saturday. But so that's more on the jazz swinging side. But then you've got, or like Ain't Misbehavin', like Great American Songbook type stuff. But then on the other hand, you get stuff like there's a lot of David Bowie and the Doors, and kind
Hmm.
of like rock and stuff, like a little bit more eclectic kind of rock and roll shit. And then you get another, another element of this is just the fact that the people that produce the show are pretty adventurous with their musical selection. So we'll mix some, um, anybody's favorite tunes of the week or whatever who wants to play.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
So something that I admire about your playing is that you're in a bunch of different projects, right? You're in a brass band.
Mhm.
You love to play straight ahead. The funk and fusion is something that you're really good about. Can you speak a little bit about on how important it is to like have an open mind and take all these and how you could apply the what you love into all these different types of settings?
Yeah, absolutely, man. To me, music is music no matter what it is. And
Hmm.
so if I can find a way in to something, then chances are I'm going to fall in love with it given enough time. So people show me new records all the time, and I always say, like, thank you for showing me this, but it's going to take me about 4 or 5 months to actually come around to it, because I'm kind of I don't know. I wouldn't say stubborn because I'm a very open person, but it takes me a while. And I'm sure most people are like this, but it takes me a while to even want to check out new stuff. Um, because my bandwidth is usually taken up by whatever I'm obsessed with at the moment, and that kind of comes and goes. And it's across the board. But like, I grew up listening to so much different music as a child, man. Like, neither of my parents are musicians by trade, but they're both musicians at heart. My mother was a dancer, and my dad has just been a punk rocker since he was a kid. But he was a punk rocker who would, like, he listened to Minor Threat, but he also would always tell me about, like, he bought Ole Coltrane, like that great record, which
Yeah.
is like, it's not the most out Coltrane record, but it's like, it's not the Lush Life record, and it's
Right.
not the Johnny Hartman record. You know what I mean? It's a little bit modal and experimental. So this is the kind of environment I grew up in, with, like, everything from like Rick James to Cannonball Adderley to, like, Beethoven and Mozart. So I don't know, man. And as far as like applying that in a working setting, it's just I've been lucky to have friends and band leaders who are willing to take a chance on stuff with me. So, you know, as far as like giving me a chance to figure out how to apply it, the one reason I really love bebop and the one reason I really love studying that music is that I really find that if you strip away some of the aesthetic things on the surface, it's just a very clear and sophisticated way of playing harmony on my instrument, on a single line instrument. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
implying harmony through linear playing. And now I'm not suggesting that, you should be playing bebop lines out of context on like a wedding gig or
Right.
like okay, like this cabaret gig I have, like, the closest we get to playing jazz or straight ahead, like I don't know, we've got some straight ahead tunes on our closing set, like to give the singers a break. But we'll play like Joy Spring or whatever. But in general, the closest I get, it's like I'm not playing bebop lines on Night Train. You know what I mean? Like it's,
Right.
but it's still kind of, but the thing about it is like you go back to some of those guys, you go back to King Curtis, you go back to some of these, like Lester Young or Coleman Hawkins, and they may not be playing as many like chromatic as extensions as Bird, but the basic architecture is still there. So I think if you can strip away and kind of learn how the different, whether it's time feel or tone or even some of the language, we have the same 12 notes in Western music for everything, right? So in the same harmonic system. So it applies across a wide variety of genres. If you are willing to listen to the music, or you're willing to take criticism from the person who really knows the music, and like, like my band leader will tell me like, hey, you're like, I like what you're playing, but you're playing too many notes for this like type of thing. Like don't play so much jazz, like play a little bit more rock and roll, or play a little bit more swinging, like, or like a little more old school,
Right.
and I'm like, like maybe don't play so many, whatever sharp 11s, and maybe like, resolve to the six, you know what I mean? Like instead
Yeah.
of the major seven, you know what I mean? Like, and it's these little details that make a huge difference, or how you approach the time feel, right? But if you really like, uh, stop trying to categorize it so hard, you realize that actually realistically, like whether it's as we were talking about Black American music or improvised music tradition, but even further, I mean, beyond that, man, like everything is like that. I don't know. That's just how I see it in the Western context,
No,
like
for
that.
sure.
I don't know if that's a real answer or not, but
No, that's perfect. What you like you mentioned Coleman Hawkins, and I feel
Mhm.
like he is one of like the coolest examples of this, is to transcend and get really good at different musical styles within jazz,
Mhm.
because he's one of those guys that was one of the bebop guys really looked up to. He was one
Mhm.
of their heroes, and he was one of the elders around that time. But he was also grew up in like the swing era, where he was like playing, um, I guess I don't want to say like ragtime, but it was more. It was less bop and more like swing. I don't really know what you call that style, but
Yeah.
same with like Lester Young and things like that. But then what was so amazing about Coleman is that later in his life, when bebop started becoming really popular, he was like, oh man, I'm not gonna miss the train on this,
Yeah.
no pun intended. But he's gonna like learn that material, and you could tell that
Yeah.
on the album he has with Sonny Rollins, where he's like really getting in there on the bebop material. And then you can also tell that he's like a huge influence to all these younger guys. We went over here on this podcast the Monk's Music record. That's like a
Oh
staple for
yeah.
me, because he
God.
plays the way he plays Ruby My Dear on there, the way that he plays on all his solos is just so profound, so masterful, so heavy, and those are the only things I can really describe it as. But he's just one of the heroes at like, kind of grasping all these different styles and like knowing what to play at the right moment, and yeah, so I just feel like that's Coleman's one of my heroes for sure.
Yeah, he's definitely a role model for that, man. Does he blow on epistrophe on that record, man? Because that's killing. Or is it Well You Need?
I think
I
it's
can't
Well You
remember.
Need It. I
Well
think
You Need.
everyone blows
Yeah.
on Well You Need It on there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he does it like after the drums or after the piano, and it's like comes out of nowhere. Yeah, no, I love
Yeah,
that. That was a huge record for me in high
that's the
school.
same one where Monk's like Coltrane.
Yeah, culture. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I love that record, man. That's in the pantheon, dude. That shit
Yeah,
is amazing.
that's an amazing record, and it's so cool how you could have Coleman on there. It's incredible.
Oh, and he fits in, man.
Yeah,
It's perfect.
he fits in, and like there's other greats on there, and it's just like it goes to show how there's other people like Gigi Grice. I forget the trumpet player. It's like Ray something, but it's like all these Ed Coltrane and Coleman, but
Yeah,
it's like how many of these guys are like there that are just so low key, like Gigi Grice, like how many people actually know him, and like
yeah.
he
People
wrote
probably knows tunes more.
yeah, he wrote Minority, he wrote like I don't know what else he wrote, but in his terms of his playing, like you have to be kind of really in it to understand and know and appreciate
Yeah.
someone like that, rather than Monk, who's a staple, or Art Blakey, who's a staple, or Coltrane, who's more of a staple.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that's cool, but yeah, so I do feel like it's really important to be open minded with what you do, and like be able to grasp the situation you're in. And I feel like the reason why I brought up Coleman is because he's a master at that, similar to how you're kind of grasping the situation to all the different styles and bands. Like, is it from burlesque to playing your own original music, to playing someone else's gig, to playing a rock show, to playing a brass band, and whatever it is, it's like you have to fit the style and understand how to, ingratiate yourself in there.
Yeah, and it helps having those gigs too, and like just like anything, man, like taking the time to maybe focus on one over the others for a little while, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't mean to imply that it just all comes together as a package, right? I mean, like there are real nuances and differences if you really want to be able to play it well. So, or address the different styles on their own terms, right? So, having the recurring gigs is really nice, and yeah, like having I think you
Yeah.
talked about this on one of your previous episodes, like having maybe your own gig to work out your own material or some of the
Yeah.
material that you really like, or having a vehicle for your own personal growth also helps with the other styles. Because the thing about it, like to me, all the best players who can morph across different styles are the ones who have their strongest personality. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like
Right.
I think of somebody like David Sanborn, who I mentioned, who was obviously a force with Marcus Miller's or alongside Marcus Miller with the David Sanborn group, and then all these things. And but like his original material and then the stuff he does as a sideman is so eclectic, and he always sounds like himself, but he doesn't sound like he's playing out of turn.
Right. I mean, you can go into all the masters like Wayne and
Yeah.
and Herbie with all that stuff too. I actually the other day I went to the Chicago Symphony Center, and I
Hmm.
saw the Wayne Shorter Legacy Band. It was the
Mm.
Danilo Perez with Brian Blade and Petitucci, and Mark Turner was playing for
Right.
Wayne.
Yeah.
And
Damn. Damn.
yeah,
That's
so
crazy, dude.
yeah. Mark Turner in that band is just, he's one of the best to saxophonists today,
Oh,
for
100%.
sure. And hearing him like, play with those guys and play Wayne's compositions, and like, because for those who don't know, the concept of that band is really spontaneous composition, and
Yeah.
even though there's certain melodies and certain things that are written out that are composed, because it's so interesting, man, because when you're watching these guys play, it's like it almost sounds like they're playing avant-garde or free, like I was talking earlier, but they're getting into all this stuff. But then you all of a sudden they're Danilo or whatever is playing some crazy shit. And then all of a sudden they're all on the same page on this one thing, and then they all turn the page. It's
Yeah.
like what you guys are reading
Yeah.
music, like what's going
Yeah,
on,
yeah. Yeah,
and
you have
it's
charts for this shit? Yeah.
yeah, and it's like so incredible. That's the only thing I have to say to describe it, because it's just like, it's obviously takes a lot of attention to listen to, and you have to be really into it. But
Mhm.
the way that they're playing music today is like, a quartet I've never heard sound like that before, and I think that's really incredible, you know.
Yeah, that's speaks to the genius of Wayne's music as well.
Yeah, I
Like
don't know if
it's
you I don't know if you've heard some of that stuff.
oh yeah, no, and I really, I mean, yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I wish I could have seen him live with that group because, like I said earlier, that stuff really pays off live. But
Yeah,
yeah, man,
I saw
a
Wayne play
lot.
with them, and then I saw Mark play with them.
Yeah, yeah. So you got both
Yeah.
perspectives there, man. Sorry, I didn't check my mic. I think that my plosives are peaking here. Where whoops. Anyway. Sorry, I just totally annihilate the yeah, an
No,
hour
you're
in.
good.
I'm
You're
like,
good.
oh, my mic's messed up. No, but anyway, the point is just that yeah, Wayne, I feel like a lot of Wayne's tunes, even going back to like the 60s, have a lot of like hidden like loops where if you're not paying attention, it just sounds like through composed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then when you get into Weather Report and specifically his late quartet stuff is like that a lot. Where it's just so sophisticated, but like I said, it's like it comes back around eventually. But with guys at that level, I mean, the level of abstraction you can get to is so high that yeah, they might as well be playing the same thing over and over again off of a lead sheet, but you would never know, right?
Yeah. No, yeah, their level of abstraction. I mean, they're just artists, and that's all
Yeah,
you have to say. It's like they're
exactly.
they're creating art up there, and like their art looks a certain way, and like maybe it takes a lot to appreciate what they're doing if you don't understand the lineage or whatever.
Hmm.
But it's so cool to see how the people in the top of their craft, undeniably these um four musicians who are like the top at their respective instruments in the world, I would have to say. It's like, how do they come together and make music, and
Hmm.
obviously, because I mean, I'm on a lifelong pursuit for greatness, hopefully, and
Hmm.
one day I could see that being me up there. But it's like, how, it's like, what are these things that these people did to like put themselves in this position to like be so creative and understand how to like make music and art with other people? It like kind of goes beyond making music, it's like a
Hmm.
spiritual thing, and it's like
Yeah.
it's just like, it's so deep to see these people make music like that together, and in like playing in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, like one of the coolest venues of all time. It's such a great historic venue that so many amazing people have graced the stage, and it's like, yeah, it's a very special thing to see that. So it was so cool to see people make music at the top of their craft.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So, yeah, last week we talked about a couple things. I know that we both together have geeked out separately at the songbook Kenny Garrett record, and you were showing me
Mhm.
that earlier today, and we both kind of dissected some of the music in there. But I wanted to bring special attention to that just because I feel like that's such an important record in modern jazz, especially. And I got to see Kenny Garrett like a month or two ago, which was incredible.
Wow.
He was playing with Michael O'Day on drums, and he's pretty incredible, and
Yeah.
a few other people. But yeah, anyway, I wanted to bring special attention because I feel like that is just a great record, and I want to know your thoughts on it.
I mean, where to begin, man? The writing and the performance, it's just such a to me it's one of the prototypes of its era and of our current era of what it means to play this music at a high level, you know. And Kenny Garrett in general is one of those guys who's just like no matter how in or out he plays, it always just sounds like the most musically deliberate stuff you've ever heard in your life. It's always so much direction and intention, and yeah, I mean, he's just got, I mean, unmistakable joy and an unmistakable mastery over the craft to the point that, it just sounds, it's just so natural, man. He's just definitely one of the true greats. I mean, it, once again, in music or anything like that, especially something as personal as this, I don't like to go too far into this objective versus subjective debate. But I think there's merits on both ends. But the thing about Kenny Garrett is when you listen to him, it's like you can definitely tell that's mastery. That's like that's one in a million.
Yeah.
That's like a one in a million kind of situation. You know what I mean? Like not just the mastery, but the creativity and the inventiveness of his approach. Yeah, man, it's unmistakable. So
Yeah,
I could
I
go
would.
on.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. One of the biggest reasons why I wanted to bring up that record is because it's going to be our new record of the week, obviously. And for me personally, I feel like this record, I've spent some time with this record, listened to it over and over again. And I encourage everyone to do so with this. But it features the great Jeff Tane Watts, Kenny Kirkland, and Nat Reeves on bass, as well as Kenny Garrett. And there's a bunch of live concerts on YouTube. Probably the most watched live jazz concert on YouTube features this Kenny Garrett quartet. I think they're in Europe or something at some jazz festival when they play this. I don't know if you've seen that video.
Yeah. Is it like Jazz Baltica or something?
Yeah,
I
Jazz
forget what. Yeah.
Baltica. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. That's killing.
yeah, and the one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to bring this up is because there's a lot of records through the '90s, but I feel like the '90s was this other really pivotal moment in especially jazz and improvised music. Because there was like this last hurrah really for this generation, to where a lot of the great musicians who invented bebop from the '60s were kind of dying off around this time, and there was still like a pretty decent majority of them still alive, to where this younger generation could learn from, and to where it was like this sweet. So yeah, I was talking about the Kenny Garrett record, right?
Yeah.
The songbook just talked about who's in that band, but the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because, like I was saying, that record is so pivotal for the moment of the '90s, to where it kind of displays how modern composition, especially how modern improvisation works. I mean, especially through Kenny Kirkland on piano. I think that is like a super modern piano sound on Kenny Kirkland right there. And any pianist who, obviously there's so many great pianists who's in the jazz tradition, like Monk and Bud Powell, but anyone who hasn't checked out Kenny Kirkland that plays like a modern style of jazz is like definitely needs to, and the biggest thing that is obviously the improvisation on that record is second to none. But the thing that really inspires me as like a composer, as I would could say myself, as like something that I really hope to aspire to, is having really wonderful compositions that are a great vehicle to improvise, is something that I think that record does beautifully, has these amazing compositions to where he could showcase the band in such like a beautiful way. And so yeah, I mean, some of my favorites being obviously The House That Nat Built, Brother Hubbard, November 15th, and we had some fun on that tune. But just the way that he approaches form, the way that he approaches melody, the way that he approaches harmony is just it's crazy. I don't know if he's just like, it's kind of crazy to envision, like you just see Kenny Garrett just like sitting at the piano. He's like, what about this, dude? And he's like going into some crazy shit. He's like, oh, what if we do a key change here? I'm like,
And out comes Miss Baja.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? Yeah.
It's like, how do we start, how do we start with an A flat minor 6 and go down to a F7 sharp 11? Like, where do we even get that to, But it's like, it makes sense because he's just like descending, when it's just like you boil it down, it's just like, oh, he's just doing that. But then
I feel like the strongest, I mean, the thing that really, to me, has always been the tell is how strong the melodies are.
Right.
Which at that point, I mean, I'm telling you, man, like what I said earlier, it's like he plays two notes and they sound intentional. So I'm not surprised, that like the melodies really carry that, it's not much more to say other than that. To me, at least in my opinion, you know what I mean? You can you can justify a lot harmonically with a strong melody,
For
you
sure.
know.
You know, it's all about the melody.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring
You know about that.
yeah, some attention to that record, and that's just something that we could talk more, and I'll probably hit, like, you know, with a bunch of different people, just because I feel like this record is so um such a landmark and like a desert island record, really, because of the way that it just, you know, the way that it's so
Yeah.
modern, and you could take this and go at so many different angles, and it's still uh definitely, you know, if you're playing jazz or creative music today, this is definitely one of those records that you should check out. Yeah, and like within the, you know, like we all love and study bebop and like this style from the 60s, but when we get into like making music today and jazz today, I wanted to ask you, who are some of these people that you look up to today and really like aspire to be like, who are making music at like the level that you want to be making music at?
So, strictly speaking, from let's talk about the tenor saxophone, right?
Right.
So, one of the records I have here actually that I've been super inspired by, and just in general, is Twio by Walter Smith III.
Let's go.
And that guy, I
I
mean,
love
that
that
record
record.
alone, yeah, that's an iconic thing, and I think that really put him on the map for like people our generation, because you know he's always this like, you know, he's of that maybe Gen X, early millennial kind of generation of like really killing New York cats. You know what I mean? And I mean he's from Houston, but I mean like by way of the East Coast. And so anyway, and his records, man, his live in Paris record is actually what I would say, like what you talk about songbook and the Kenny Garrett songbook band. Um, to me, that live in Paris Walter Smith record. Do you know that one?
Yeah, with Ambrose.
Yeah, with
Yeah, and they
Ambrose
play
and
Stablemates on there.
dude, and yeah, Ambrose and oh, who is it? Uh, r- Damn it. Um, the grandson of one of
Is
the
it Eric
greatest bebop
Harlan?
drummers, who I'm
Or
not. No,
no,
no, no. Marcus,
Marcus Gilmore.
Marcus Gilmore. Yeah, yeah. Who's his grandfather?
Roy Haynes.
Roy Haynes. Yeah, yeah, Roy. So Marcus Gilmore. Yeah, I mean, that's a killing record. And to me, that's like the sort of that's like the 2000s answer. Yeah, that's like the next generation of those guys, because that, like, to me, yeah, if you want to play modern jazz today, you got to know songbook and Kenny Garrett, but to us that's already old, you know, because like I don't know what year you were born, but it was probably around the time this record came out. You know, I was
Right.
4 when songbook came out. So
Yeah, that
you,
was,
you, you,
I
you know what I
wasn't
mean?
born
Like,
yet.
yeah, so there you go. Yeah. So you're basically
Yeah.
like reaching into the archives, whereas like these guys, you know, the way Marcus Gilmore approaches, I mean, that's a whole nother story that I don't even, you know, feel qualified to speak on. But the way that those guys approach that material, the originals and the standards, is just yeah, that's next level, man. So definitely Walter Smith, and then let's see who else. Great young tenor players, man, or young tenor players are probably older than me,
A
but
little,
like
I wanted to mention Walter has this hilarious record out now. It's like three of
yeah,
us are from
for
Houston
Houston,
and Ruben is
Ruben is
not.
not. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like
yeah,
that's
dude.
pretty funny. He's kind of
Well,
a jokester, man.
he's known for a sense of humor, that's for sure, man. That guy's definitely meant for social media with his
Yeah,
goofy,
yeah.
goofy
If
shit.
none of you guys know Walter's social media presence, go check it out because it's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's one of the few things worth getting on the internet for anymore.
Yeah,
But Walter Smith for sure, and then I'd say like Nicole Glover is another person I really enjoy. If you know her,
I'm not too familiar with
she's
her.
phenomenal. She's a great tenor player, New York tenor player. And then let's see, of course, Melissa Aldana was one of my big inspirations in college, especially because, of course, if you listen to her, especially her early stuff, you can tell that her guiding lights were Sonny Rollins, Joe Henderson, and Mark Turner, which is just about like the trifecta of the stuff that, you know, I listened to a lot at that time. And you know, she always has phenomenal bands. That's another that's another person to check out as far as her bands and her approach to composition and improvisation. Um, let's see, some of my favorites from her actually, her record. Let's see, not I think it was Visions. That's a great record. That was produced by Laga Lund, who plays guitar on that, which is incredible. And
Yeah.
then
Monster.
yeah, and then there's a great Carlos Enriquez record, Dizzy Conclave, which is that live record where and she plays tenor on that alongside I think Terrell Stafford on trumpet, and then Cuban rhythm section basically, and they play all these Dizzy Gillespie bebop tunes arranged in like an Afro-Cuban style, which is one of the most just genius. I mean, the arrangements themselves are brilliant. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
that's as far as like really modern stuff. But my taste is very. I've listened to old music mostly, so that's kind of.
right. So I wanted to talk to you based on arrangement versus composition, right?
Mhm.
And it's like when you what to you what is the more challenging thing to do? First of all, is arrange a tune, a new a hip version of arrangement, or come up with a new composition? And second, which one is more important than the other?
Mm. Wow, that's a good question. Those are both good questions. Let's see. So I suppose it in both cases they can be difficult or easy depending on how strong your vision is for the end result, if that makes sense. So if you have a group, so I find it way easier to arrange and write for specific groups. Now if I try to just approach a song on its own terms, that can be pretty difficult. Like to arrange, especially if it's something that's very popular or if it's something that I already really love the way it is. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It can be hard to come up with something new just on the spot. But if we're on a gig or if I'm playing with a group and I just hear something on a gig and I'm like, oh man, that reminds me of this song. This would be really sick to do it in this way, right? That becomes way easier. And the same with composition. If I've got like if I'm just writing for writing's sake, I end up kind of chasing my own tail a little bit and fall into the judgmental zone very easily, like way too early. Whereas if I have a gig coming up or if I have a specific group in mind, and it kind of matches like the time of life that I'm in, then it's very easy to just come up with new ideas and continuously work them out with very little actual judgment. Does that make
Right.
sense? That's
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Something. I mean, for me, in my opinion, like I feel like both are something that is really challenging to do. First of all,
Hmm.
and
Absolutely.
for me, I think composition comes a little bit easier than arrangement,
Yeah.
just because. But arranging is, I feel like, is also a very awesome thing to do and like very important thing to do because original arrangements and how many arrangements of like on Green Dolphin Street are there? There's probably tons and tons, and I've heard and I hear new ones all the time. But I feel like that's also part of the jazz vernacular, or like
Hmm.
Black American music vernacular, is like when you arrange a certain song and your personal arrangement of all the things you are, or your
Yeah.
arrangement of this tune, it's like that. Or you look at Ahmad Jamal, he is
Hmm.
one of the kings of arrangements in his trio because they arranged all these amazing standards in such a unique and way to where it's like it's almost their original songs. It's like how like I wouldn't be able to tell that Ahmad Jamal didn't write "But Not for Me" on Live at the Pershing. It's like that's
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
tune.
It's the canonical version too, like because everybody else just kind of plays it like that now,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
not, whatever, what have you,
Everyone,
right? I
yeah,
mean,
everyone knows that. Ba ba ba
mhm.
ba da ba 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 da ba. Everyone
Yeah, yeah,
knows that
exactly,
now
yeah,
from that version. And people put
totally,
that bass line into a bunch of different things now. But the point is that I feel like arrangement is honestly, probably a little bit more difficult than even composition because coming up
yeah,
with an original arrangement is is heavy, man. Like if you have your own way that you play this tune, you're gonna like bring it into this band and play it and like record it even or whatever is amazing, especially for a record. Like, you know, if you're gonna record a tune, you know, let's put a dress on it or whatever to make it your own, right? To make it your own arrangement of it.
Right. And it's like the source material, if the source material you're dealing with is so good, it's like, who are you to mess with perfection, right?
Right, right. No,
It's like
that's
you
the other thing
better
too.
you better earn your right, or you better earn it with the musicality, right? I mean, that's one way of looking at it. Another way is, you know, to not be so precious about it and just do what you want because you know, who cares? It's kind of like if your intentions are pure and you're just trying to further the music. I mean, like
Yeah. No, I was watching this thing too on I
leave it
think
to
it
the
was like
critics, right?
it was an Instagram reel or something about like
Hmm.
Branford Marsalis talking about what Art Blakey told him. I don't know if you saw this.
Yeah, he was like, yeah, what was it? George Gershwin doesn't need your sorry ass to
Yeah.
make it hit. Yeah, and
Yeah,
quit
yeah.
playing substitutions over the fucking song. The only thing
Yeah.
I know is that you don't know how to play the real changes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like there's that perspective too. It's like,
Oh
man,
yeah.
if like, you know, you play a great tune like a Gershwin tune, they're amazing, one of America's best writers, you know, do you really need your own a
Your
personal
sorry ass.
opinion,
Yeah.
your sorry
Yeah.
ass to
Yeah.
write your own arrangement on that tune? It's probably not, is the answer.
Well, right, and it has to do with like, have you truly dealt with the source material, or like Art Blakey was getting at with Branford? It's like, uh, are you just trying to do what's comfortable, right? Like, are you just trying to play in a way that you're used to, versus just dealing with the source material on its own terms and doing that, right? I think
Right.
that's a lot to do with it anyway. So yeah, that's funny though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jacob, I really appreciate you coming on today. I have one more question I wanted to ask you is like I want to make this a thing where I ask most of my guests this. But just in your opinion, what are like top 5 standards that you think that people should know today? Like what are like the today standards? I know we have like, you know, Monk tunes, this, that tune,
Mm,
Charlie Parker tunes, everything from 50, 70 years ago.
yeah.
But even including all those songs, including everything that was released last 20 years all the way through the last 100 years, what are like 5 tunes that musicians who are showing up to a jam, trying to get into this music, trying to play, what should they know and what should they check out today?
Right. So, um, let's see. So I would say, yeah, it'll be a mix of new and old, but um, I highly recommend everybody check out uh, Isfahan, right?
Billy
The great
Strayhorn.
Strayhorn tune. Um,
That's classic. Yeah,
yeah, you know
that's
what I
great.
mean, and people know that, but that's one that I feel like I call a lot because it's just like an endlessly fun and challenging. And then, of course, so along the lines of like, let's say the Joe Henderson catalog, Beatrice for sure is another great Sam Rivers tune that Joe kind of made. But I think that's another great modern standard, partially for the harmony as well, because you know that's an old tune, right? It was written in the '60s, but that's like I feel like there's a lot of harmonic movements in that tune that really are still used today,
Is that
right?
Sam Rivers?
That's Sam Rivers tune, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Beatrice, yeah. And of course the genius Joe Henderson take on the state of the tenor,
Right,
this
right,
record.
right.
You know, that's the one that's famous. Let's see.
Yeah, I know I'm asking you on the spot, but
No, you're good. Let's say so. Let's along the Joe Henderson line. You know, he's got a lot of great tunes that I think people should know. But you know, everybody knows the inner urges and the stuff like that. But one that gets overlooked that I think is a beautiful tune that also has deep harmonic implications is Isotope.
mm,
You know, I think that's all about, you know, I mean, the diminished sound without ever sounding diminished, right?
hmm
It's kind of buried in there in the turnarounds. And
with
so
the
that's another
sus, like
one.
kind of like a sus blues, right?
Yeah,
But with
yeah,
the diminished
totally.
turnaround.
With yeah, with the minor third dominant chords relationship, right? And so I think I always had the theory that I think that's why it's called Isotope, you know, because if you check out Barry Harris, right, he has the family of dominants. The four dominants related off the same diminished
Right.
chord, right?
Uh-huh.
And so you know what an isotope is in chemistry, right? It's the same.
I
Uh,
don't know. You have to remind me.
it's the same. It's the same. Well, I'm going to butcher it, but it's the same atom with different amounts of electrons, right? So
Okay.
you'll have isotopes of carbon that are like the same exact element, but they have a different number of electrons, which means they interact differently with the material around them. And I always thought that those four dominant chords were kind of isotopes of each other because they're substitutions for each other. If you think about it like that, they're like they're
Ah,
they're like they're like four different perspectives on the same basic voice leading, if that makes sense.
yeah.
You get what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
I thought maybe Joe was a little more hip than he let on. Hip to chemistry. Let's see. What else? So I yeah.
Well,
I
like a
think
tune,
another one.
a tune like Isotope. One second is
Yeah.
um, like that turnaround, for example. That's so iconic to Isotope, right? But something like that is so important. I feel like I agree with you. Is like a very important tune to know because you can apply that turnaround or those changes into a lot of other
Yeah.
contexts. And so that tune is just kind of like where it came from, and it's important to know where these things came from, right? So you could put um, like a so you could circle back your studies, right? Okay, I'm gonna
Yeah.
apply this turnaround over, now I'm gonna apply this on this blues,
Hmm.
written by this tune that who came out and who wrote it last year or whatever. But because all this stuff came before, I can apply this thing on this part of the tune.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's why these tunes are so important because they give you great options to apply in all different types of settings. So anyway, go ahead with
Yeah,
your second, third tune.
substitute changes. Yeah, so that was the third tune. Then the fourth tune I'd say that I really love playing that we've played together a lot is "I Can't Help It" by Stevie Wonder by
Yeah,
way
there
of
you
Michael
go.
Jackson. Right,
I
that's
would
another
agree.
great. Yeah, that's another great modern tune. I mean, honestly, any Stevie tune is one of those things that I think all of Stevie's catalog is our modern standards as far as like playing pop tunes in an improvised setting.
Yeah,
I know you've got quite a lot of Stevie in your book when you play gigs.
definitely,
Um,
man.
any, yeah.
I'm this is a side note because I'm thinking about this, but um, I'm I think it's next week. I don't know
Mhm.
if you know the saxophonist Ron Blake.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but he's coming to the jazz showcase with
Wow.
Bobby Broom, and he's gonna be playing. They're gonna be playing for 4 nights in a row, so I'm
Jealous.
super stoked about that. But Ron Blake just released an album. They don't have any Stevie tunes or anything on there, but it's called Mistaken Identity with Bobby
Mm.
Broom on there. I don't know if you checked that out, but you should check it
No,
out.
but I'm saving it right now, dude.
Yeah,
Oh, dude, yeah. Is that so? The first tune on there.
that's from Tenors of Our Time.
Oh,
No, no, no. The ballad on there. What's the ballad on there?
sorry. Let me find it again. I just lost it. No, is that so? Is a Duke Pearson
Duke
tune.
Pierce. Okay.
When we were one.
When we
Yeah,
were
that's
one
off
is
Tenors
from
of Our
Tenors of Our
Time.
Time. Yeah,
Yeah, dude, that is one of the greatest. Is that it? That's a Roy original, right?
I think so.
Yeah. When we were one, is that the Roy original or is that the Johnny Griffin original? Because Johnny Griffin has a ballad on there too. I think it was
It might have been Johnny. I don't know.
because that's gorgeous.
But yeah,
Yeah,
Bobby on there it just sounds amazing. His he always sounds amazing. But
yeah.
one of my favorite tune from there, the tune that I've been really digging, is the tune Allison off that
Ooh,
record, and it's so beautiful, man, so beautiful.
I
So you'll have to check
wonder.
it out.
I will, dude. I wonder who. Let me see if I can find this real quick. This is great radio right here. Me typing shit.
No, no, but that record came out last year, and Ron Blake, for people who don't know, he's like the saxophonist in that Saturday Night Live band. He played with Roy Hargrove. He
Mhm.
played with
He was a teacher to some of the young greats, man. Right? He
teacher to
was one
some of
of
the young
the.
greats. He's one of those underrated saxophone players who probably doesn't get enough credit today. He's up there with Joshua Redman, up there with Chris
Mhm.
Potter as one of the best, up there with Joel Fromm. Up there with all these guys as one of the best saxophone players today and one of the best composers. And yeah, I've got to see him a couple times. I mean, still to this day, one of the best shows I've ever seen was the Love Letters to Roy with Nicholas Payton.
Yeah.
And Ron Blake was in that band playing all the Roy tunes. But as far as like some of the torch-bearing records of this year or last year, I would say that that's one of the coolest modern records is that Ron Blake one, and it has
Yeah.
Reuben Rogers, Nat Reeves, and Kobe Watkins on it.
Thanks for the recommendation, man. I'm definitely gonna check that out. That looks really awesome.
Yeah,
Let me see. Did I have another fifth
yeah.
standard?
Let's go to tune 5.
Let's go to tune 5. Let's see here. I'm just trying to toy between doing something old or something new because I just love learning old songs, man. Let's stick with something older, man. I'd say well, I know the other day, man, you had Monk as one of your standards that you were
Yeah,
talking about. Um let's see here cuz I do want to pick something new-ish. Um I suppose that it doesn't really matter because all those tunes are going to be amazing, but one of the composers that I think that really informs a lot of modern playing is Benny Golson.
yes,
You know what I mean? So
yeah,
any Benny Golson tune is definitely up there, man. Like, but people know those, man. People know Stablemates usually. People know
yeah.
Uncanny
Along Came Betty.
Betty.
Yeah, I was actually checking out what Moanin', right? That's where Along Came
Yeah,
Betty's on. And like, man, that Along Came Betty, that tempo, man. Like, usually cats play Along Came Betty way quicker than that
yeah.
original tempo. And I was just like, when I heard it, and like, I've obviously listened to it before, but it's been a while. And then I put it back on and listening to like the original, because I think like once you learn a tune, and you
Mhm.
got it pretty well ingrained, it's like, you don't listen to the same song over and over again for a while. You check out more stuff and come back to it, whatever. But when I came back to it, and I was like I was listening to the record, and it was just like, man, like this tempo is
Yeah.
crazy right now. Like these cats don't play it that tempo, right? Everyone
Oh,
plays
dude,
that
and
tune way faster.
it's hard, man. It's tough, man. And actually, that record has one of I think the greatest Benny Golson tunes ever is "Are You Real,"
Mm,
which that's one that nobody plays. But I'm not going to put that on my list. The thing I'm going to put on my list is the fifth tune is "Wayne's Thing" by Kenny Garrett.
there you go. Okay.
Because as far as stuff to know at a jam, as far as stuff to know, like as far as a modern riff on an old formula, I mean, it's Kenny Garrett. What else? What else to say, man? It's in, especially on saxophone. It's in a fun key, but it's a E minor key center. It's in a slightly less comfortable. You're not in a flat key. You're not playing in B flat minor or C minor where we all live all the time. But
Right.
E minor is a gorgeous sound and super fun on all the saxophones
Yeah,
and
Kenny did that as his encore at the Chicago Jazz Fest. And
beautiful.
it was like one of those things. It was so funny, man. He's like a master showman, but it was one of those things where he was playing the tune, then he would have like one person leave at a time from the band.
Uh huh.
And then he's just like playing Wayne's thing. It's like boom,
It
boom,
keeps
boom,
going.
boom.
Yeah.
And then like the drummer leaves and everyone's like
Uh-huh.
still like going in. And then like the bass player leaves and the pianist leaves. And then it just ends up with like Kenny going like, just him up on stage, just like wailing. And then eventually he'll stop and then he'll do one of those things like, I can't hear you. And then he'll go back
Mhm.
in, and then like he's just a master
Yeah.
showman, So
The,
Kenny
the
Garrett
full
deserves to be on the
package, dude.
list for sure.
Full package. Yeah, man. It's rare, but I want to be like Kenny Garrett when I grow up. You know what
Yeah, me
I'm
too. Me
saying?
too. All right, man. I think we covered a lot of bases, man. But thank you for cooling one with me today. We'll definitely have to get you back on because I'm sure we could just talk for hours more.
Yeah, man. I had a great time, dude. Best of luck with all your gigs in Chicago and
Yeah, yeah.
you
I'm
know,
going to see the Emmett Cohen trio tonight. Actually,
beautiful,
they're at the
beautiful.
Jazz Showcase with Joe
Is
Farnsworth,
Oh shit. So it's Farns and who's on bass?
Joey
Who's
Ranieri.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's a
Joey's from
real.
Chicago, so he's
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's a young lion, man. I mean, I used to play with him when I was 16. You know, it's
Nice.
crazy to know that he's like playing with Joe Farnsworth at the
Yeah.
Jazz Showcase with Emmett Cohen. So good for him, man. That's
Killing.
really freaking cool. But yeah, man, let's hang when I'm down in Nashville in a couple weekends. And
Yeah, man.
dude, I hope all your gigs go freaking awesome this week. And thanks you for carving some time out of your day to join me here.
Thanks, brother. Anytime, dude.
Yeah, man. All right, dude. Peace.
All right.
Much love.
Shout out. See you guys.
Yeah, see you.